Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Ron Ashburn. I'm the Executive Director of the Association for Iron and Steel Technology, and I'd like to welcome you all this morning to the AISTech Town Hall Forum. This type of town hall is just one example of how AIST fulfills our mission to advance the technical development, the production, the processing, and the application of iron and steel. And like AISTech, this town hall serves to disseminate new ideas and the sharing of best practices that collectively improve the welfare of our industry. A healthy steel industry is essential to any manufacturing economy. And for us here in the United States, a healthy steel industry will enable us to rebuild our aging infrastructure. It's also of vital importance in our drive for energy independence. A healthy steel industry is critical to meeting our automotive fuel economy requirements and to solidifying our nation's defense. We must also protect our workers with safe working conditions and invest in training so that the high-tech steel jobs don't sit idle as our current workforce begins to enter retirement. A healthy steel industry must protect our environment by keeping the air that we breathe and the water that we drink free from contamination. And the industry must challenge itself to be an innovation leader by engineering stronger, lighter weight steel grades with improved energy efficiency. We expect each company to do its part towards becoming a sustainable enterprise. And our mission this morning is to tackle the key issues that will move us one step closer to that goal. Now, before we begin, I would like to point out our emergency egress route. If we need to evacuate, you actually leave from inside this room. There are stairs in the back of the room. You don't go out the back, they're in the columns. And there's also stairs behind the stage where I'm at. Also, I'm going to ask that you please mute all cell phones, and do note that the recording of this event is prohibited. We will accept audience questions via email to townhall@aist.org. Again, that's townhall@aist.org. Please do include your name and your company affiliation for your question to be considered. There won't be any intermission, and we're going to go straight through till 12 noon this morning. As a conference attendee, you've received a coupon with your registration badge that can be exchanged for lunch in the lower exhibit hall. That's Hall DE, immediately following this event, and we look forward to seeing all of you there to continue the debate. And don't forget that this afternoon at 2:45 p.m., also in the lower exhibit hall, we're going to give away that 2019 Chevy Silverado pickup truck. And remember, the only catch is you do have to be present to win. That's a lower level hall at 2:45 p.m. I wish you all good luck in winning that truck. And before we introduce our panelists, I want to acknowledge our exclusive Town Hall Forum sponsor is NTN Bearing Corporation of America. We are indeed grateful for NTN for their enduring support through the years for this particular program, and I'd ask you to please join me in thanking NTN Bearing Corporation. Now, to introduce our panelists, please welcome the Town Hall Session Chair. He's an AIST past president from Hatch Associates, George Koenig.
Thanks, Ron. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully everybody's in shape and in position to enjoy a very good morning with the AIST Forum. This is our 18th Town Hall Forum. With the help and support of Tom Usher from U.S. Steel and Dan D'Amico from Nucor Steel, we were able to initiate this program 18 years ago, and it has been successful ever since. The original concept, which is still in place today, is to have an informal, living room type discussion amongst the key executives in our industry to discuss the current events in our industry. I want to take a minute to thank Ron Ashburn and the AIST staff who have taken this event to the level it is today. Ron, thank you, and your staff. Thank you. We all have put a lot of effort in to make this event happen. So if this is your first town hall, your 5th town hall, or even your 15th town hall, just sit back and enjoy the interaction of this year's current events. I guarantee you the session is going to be informative, entertaining, and well worth your time this morning. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce to you the 2019 Town Hall panelists. I would ask that you hold your applause until each panelist is introduced. Starting on your left, Conrad Winkler, President and CEO of EVRAZ North America. Barry Schneider, Senior Vice President, Flat Roll Steel Group, Steel Dynamics. Scott Buckiso, Senior Vice President, Automotive Solutions, United States Steel Corporation. Johnny Jacobs, Vice President and General Manager, Nucor Kankakee. And Carol Jackson, Chairman and CEO of HarbisonWalker International. Please give them a round of applause. Our moderator, back for his 10th year with the Town Hall, is Jon Delano. And I got to tell you, 10 years ago, Ron and I were very concerned of who we were going to get to replace John Calloway, our moderator for the first 8 years of the Town Hall Forum, who had unfortunately passed away. Calloway was a stellar talk show host for the public broadcasting station in Chicago and did a great job for us in the 8 years that he was with us. Ron and I interviewed a number of candidates, and boy, it was concerning, it was tough at the time, but when we met John, we knew he was the man. And he's been here, and here we are 10 years later, just gone strong. So John is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Haverford College and the University of Pennsylvania Law School. John is the money manager and politics editor for KDKA TV, a CBS affiliate in Pittsburgh. He's also an adjunct professor of public policy and politics at Carnegie Mellon University Heinz College. We are pleased to have him moderate again this year, so let's give a nice round of applause for Jon Delano.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. George, thank you very much for those kind words. It's great to be with you all again, especially in my hometown of Pittsburgh, where, like many in my generation, I worked my way through college at a steel mill during the summer. Let me once again thank George Koenig and Ron Ashburn for inviting me back to moderate this town hall. I'm glad to know that over 10 years we haven't messed it up too badly, and it's always great to be here with them. And I might add, they're great people to work with, as I know many of you know directly, and also their staff, particular thanks to Sam Cusick, who's been really good and helpful to me as we prepare for this outstanding panelists that George and Ron have assembled. You know, as a Pennsylvania business and political reporter, I get to interview lots of folks, from the President of the United States to the Secretary of Commerce to lots of local leaders as well. But I usually learn more from these executives in the steel industry than I do from anyone else. So Carol, Johnny, Scott, Barry, Conrad, thank you so much for being part of this. It's great to be with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the last time we gathered, the President's 232 tariffs were brand new. And it was really unclear what the overall impact was going to be on North American steel. Today, we have a much clearer picture. As 2018 ended, steel shipments were up, finished steel imports were down, and apparent steel demand was up. Some mills reaped record profits, restarted idled capacity, and announced new expansion projects and investments. In fact, just last week, a few miles from here, America's oldest steel company announced a $1 billion investment in what its CEO called, quote, a giant leap forward. Morgan Stanley Research predicts U.S. capacity alone could grow 15 to 18 million tons by 2022. Steel is going high-tech with 4.0 digitalization, markets continue to evolve, and workforce challenges increase as baby boomers like me retire, and now Generation Z enters the job market. So, let's take a closer look at all these hot issues with this great panel of industry leaders. All right, lady and gentlemen. It's so good to have a lady here. Thank you. Let's start with a question with a one-word answer. Just one word. Later, I'll give you 60 seconds to elaborate. One word. In one word, describe last year, 2018, for your company. And I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So, Scott, Buckiso, what's that one word?
I would say the one word for the company would be change.
Change. Gotcha. Johnny Jacobs from Nucor.
Record-breaking.
Record-breaking.
Okay. Technically, one word.
That is a hyphenated word because it exemplifies what last year was in the industry.
We'll accept it hyphenated. We'll accept it hyphenated.
All right, we'll let you slip.
Leave it to Nucor. Sneak in an extra word here. Carol Jackson from HarbisonWalker.
Intense.
Intense. Okay. Barry Schneider from Steel Dynamics.
I would say our word would be fabulous.
Fabulous. And Conrad Winkler from EVRAZ North America.
Brutal.
I love it. We go from fabulous to brutal, right next to each other. All right, let's go back and take 60 seconds. Scott, change. What do you mean?
Well, take a look at what we've done in the last, not only last year, but in 2017, and it was a fabulous year. I agree with all that, but those years, and because of the things that have been put in place across the industry, have allowed us to change our company. Change our company and what we're doing from a technology standpoint, what we're doing from a talent standpoint, and what we're doing from a cost standpoint. And so I think those are things that we need to continue to do. No matter how outstanding the year is, it's still a challenge, and we still need to. We're changing every day.
We'll come back to more of that in a second. Johnny, record-breaking.
Absolutely.
Explain.
Our Nucor team set records in the areas of earnings, revenue, and shipments in 2018. But not only did Nucor set those records, our customers also had record years, which is extremely important to us. In fact, if you look across the manufacturing sector, that sector as a whole saw its best profit margins in over 20 years. And employment grew by net 300,000 jobs, which is the best growth in the manufacturing sector since 1997. Now, these records, they were certainly fueled by what we saw with a strong economy, aided by deregulation, tax reform, and finally, meaningful and much needed trade action. But also for Nucor and our team there, we executed on what has been a long-term strategic plan that included $9 billion worth of investment since 2009. And our team delivered the results. So thank you, Team Nucor, and congratulations.
We're going to get into a lot of what you've just mentioned in a second. So let me ask Carol, intense at HarbisonWalker, intense.
Absolutely. Our team at HarbisonWalker defines the term intensity. As I would imagine most all of you know, HarbisonWalker has been around for a very, very long time, 150 years plus, if you really consider the origins of our company. And yet, we've gone through a renaissance, a rebirth as a company, rebranding ourselves in 2014 and claiming once again the power, the pride, the intensity of the HarbisonWalker name that's defined by our people. Certainly, we are absolutely partners with our customers in the steel industry, and we're proud to support the growth that Johnny mentioned, and the benefits that we're all receiving as a result is wonderful, but it really is fundamentally about our people and the company we've built, the strong company and the strong future that we're delivering on for the next 150 years.
Great. Thanks, Carol. Appreciate it. Barry Schneider, Steel Dynamics. Fabulous. Fabulous.
Well, I have to say I'm going to echo Johnny's thoughts. We have a very strategic plan, And our teams work very hard in good times and bad to make sure that we're always the lowest cost provider and also that we're doing what our customers need to do. So when you have an opportunity, and sure there was outside influences last year, but when we have a strong demand situation like we had, to be able to bring everything to bear and bring everything up to 110% when the customers really need it, it was really fulfilling to see the teams and all the great ideas over the years really just come to fruition. And I suppose it's like getting that big at-bat in the World Series and knocking it out of the park, because it's that chance you get every once in a while to say, hey, look, it was a good idea what we did. So I really appreciate what the teams did. It was, sometimes I wish I was closer to the action making the steel, but definitely enjoyed seeing the success they had across all our platforms last year.
Good. Thanks, Barry. Conrad, we go from fabulous to brutal for EVRAZ North America. Brutal. What do you mean?
Well, first of all, I needed to come up with a word that was a little more interesting. The first word was really going to be mixed, and I thought, compared to fabulous, it's not going to play. So let's go with brutal instead. It was a mixed year. We had some tremendous operational successes, which the EVRAZ team is really proud of. We went, I think, from 2014 to over 4,500 employees to the middle end of 2016 to about 2,500 employees, and now we're up over 4,000 employees. And so going through those kinds of ups and downs that's associated with being in both the steel industry and energy tubulars, has been kind of exciting to see the growth return. On the other hand, for us, we've seen some really terrific things with our customers. We were ranked the #1 plate mill in the USA in Portland. In our rail business, we've had our largest customers rank us as supplier #1. For our large diameter pipe business, we continue to develop longer term relationships with new products, and we're very excited about that. On the other hand, it was a rough year for us. We typically ship about 300 to 500,000 tons of steel from the USA to Canada, and about 300 to 500,000 tons of steel from Canada to the USA, and we typically import about 800,000 tons of slab raw material into Portland. So one can imagine the financials of our situation were really challenged in a time in which there was so much really terrific and exciting things going on in the market. It was definitely a mixed year for us.
Good. Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us. And we're going to, again, come back to all of these topics that our panelists have raised. But let me start, if I may, panelists, with capital investments. Because given the success for most of 2018, billions of dollars, billions, are being pumped back into capital investments in steel and related industries. And some of these investments began before last year, others are just getting started. So I'd like to hear a little more from each of you about what's going on in your particular operations and how the optimism of the past year translates into capital investment going forward into the 2020s. So Scott at US Steel, if I can start with you.
Sure.
I guess I'm starting this question with you because you've had the most recent announcement. I heard your CEO, Dave Burritt, say last week in his announcement at the Edgar Thomson's Works, quote, "We're done playing defense. It's time to start playing offense," unquote, is what Dave Burritt said, as he announced a $1 billion investment in the Mon Valley Works to build a state-of-the-art endless casting rolling facility. This is on top of the company's already $2 billion asset revitalization program, like rebuilding blast furnaces at Great Lakes Works and lots of upgrades at Gary and other places as well. So, and then you have your work with Kobe Steel and Protex. So give us some example. What's going on here? Is this a new U.S. Steel Corporation?
It absolutely is. It's new and old. I think that if you look across the last several years at U.S. Steel with what we've been able to do with our balance sheet, being able to lower our costs, and then with the economy in general, in the way it's gone over the last couple of years, coupled with fairer trade policies, okay? U.S. Steel has never shied away from open and free markets. We can compete with any of our competitors here in the U.S. or anybody in any other country, but we need to have fair trade, right? So the things that we've done, and I'm sure we'll talk about that some more, the things that the current administration have done have helped that, right? So we have kind of a two-headed snake there, all good news, okay? But it has allowed us to execute on our long-term strategy, okay? Which is the innovation, the technology, our talent, and moving down that cost curve. All those things that we've done over the past couple of years have been in that. You mentioned a couple of them.
What excites you the most about your investments?
The investments themselves are going to allow us to capture more market share and be more innovative in the automotive business, the consumer and industrial business, OTCG with our line pipe and our premium connections. We're moving forward in all those areas to be in those attractive markets. Okay, and we believe those are the attractive markets moving forward. So you mentioned, $2 billion of investment into our facilities over the last 2 years, going out into 2020. We announced a new dynamo electrical steel line in our USSK facility over in Slovakia, which is going to allow us to bring that technology here in the future, because we think that's a growing market here as well. And then, as you mentioned, and everybody I'm sure is well aware, Dave mentioned our $1 billion investment. We also announced recently our new EAF down at our Fairfield facility. All of that is just extremely exciting to Team U.S. Steel, and everybody's executing on that and looking forward to that future. Not a new U.S. Steel, but a U.S. Steel that is able to be competitive in any cycle, in any market.
Right. Thank you, Scott. Johnny, let me ask you, correct me if I'm wrong, but Nucor is in the midst of a growth initiative with at least 10 projects representing more than, get this, $3.6 billion, including a $180 million merchant bar mill at your own facility in Kankakee, right? So, and in January, Nucor announced a $1.35 billion project capable of producing 1.2 million tons per year of steel plate products. I think I read that. And Nucor has 6 capital investment projects starting up in 2019 alone, representing another $1 billion. So, wow.
Wow.
Wow. Describe some of these major projects that you really think are going to make the difference for Nucor going ahead.
Thanks, John. As we talked about the record year in 2018, it didn't come simply by a better market. It didn't come simply through luck. It came through us at Nucor executing on a long-term strategy. And that strategy is centered around these top capital investments. I mean, I alluded to the $9 billion that we've invested in prior years. And that path has centered around us being disciplined, bringing focus and returns greater than our cost of capital, and sustainability, where we focused on what we do around improving cost, improving quality, improving leadership position in markets. And that is exactly what we have in front of us with the $3.5 billion that we've earmarked between now and 2022. Those projects you touch on, one's very near to me, the Kankakee expansion, a new MBQ mill in Kankakee, 500,000 tons, allowing our facility, our team there, to move up the value chain, to take advantage of a cost position in that market due to the central aspect of scrap and the market presence from our customers. The plate mill, which was recently announced and going to Kentucky, a 1.2 million ton plate facility, an investment of over $1.3 billion centered around allowing Nucor to approach a market in the Midwest that's one of the most attractive plate markets, to allow us to focus on delivering roughly 97% of the full scope of product mix that's needed in the marketplace. We talk about the growth in automotive. We're in the process of completing investments at our Hickman, Arkansas facility that will move Nucor deeper into third-generation steel, that will allow us to produce more advanced high-grade and high-strength steels, motor laminates, We talk about the energy sector, significant investments at our Gallatin, Kentucky facility to allow us to better supply the full range of products in the energy side. We are excited at Nucor. We are focused on making our future brighter than it's ever been and to ensure that we have record years yet to come through these investments.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Carol, I think you told me that what's good for steel is good for refractories.
Absolutely.
Adding, which of course is true, adding that we cannot make enough refractories for steel right now, which I assume explains why you are adding additional capacity, I think 25% by the end of the third quarter.
Correct.
Are you having a hard time keeping up? What are you doing here?
Well, first, I get very excited, and I know our folks get excited about all the wonderful things that are happening downstream with our steel customers. Obviously, it's fantastic to hear every U.S. Steel announcement, every Nucor announcement, EVRAZ. It's you know, what's good for you guys is really great for us, and it's the kind of relationship where you can't make steel without us, without refractories. Let's face it. Yeah, exactly. Feel a little captive. But no, what I mean by that is it's a symbiotic relationship, and just like our downstream customers in steel are investing and growing and building and looking to compete in a fair global economy, so are we as a refractory supplier. And so at Harbison, we are paying off on the investment our customers have made in us as a supply partner through additions to our capacity. Not unlike Nucor, we have a strategic plan that we've been delivering on for the past several years. And quite frankly, because of what's happening in steel, certainly 232 has been helpful. There's other factors that we believe are at play causing a positive sentiment in downstream markets. We saw an opportunity to accelerate investment in our assets, in particular those that support the steel industry. We not only are increasing our brick capacity by 25% to support steel directly, an investment, by the way, that we started last year because we saw what was coming. We also are paying off on that $30 million investment in a new monolithic plant, state-of-the-art facility aligned with our customers downstream, in particular the steel industry. So we are ready, willing, able, committed. Can we handle it? Absolutely. We are ready to go, and we're loving every minute of it, and happy to grow with our partners in steel.
Carol, thank you.
You bet.
Barry at Steel Dynamics. Late last year, Steel Dynamics announced plans to build a $1.8 billion new state-of-the-art electric arc furnace flat roll steel mill with the capability of producing up to 3 million tons of the latest generation of advanced high-strength steel products. But that's not your only investment. So tell us more what you're up to at Steel Dynamics.
Not by a long shot. I think our board of directors has been very brave and very assertive with us to make sure that not only are we preparing for the good times like 2018, but that we perform at the low points of the market, we bring the lows up. So when we look strategically at what we're investing in, each facility, each asset we add really goes through a lot of scrutiny to make sure that the technology, the productivity is going to place that asset where it can survive and be very sustainable into the future. So over the last few years, we've made entries into more productive rebar at both our Roanoke facility and our Columbia City facility. Innovation, but as well as expanding the horizons. Our Steel of West Virginia operation, probably the most senior operation we have. We've invested in galvanizing and process equipment and robotics. So across the spectrum, we've been wisely growing for 25 years where it makes sense for us to be. In our flat roll division, we've added galvanizing, we've added the ability to pickle, shape control. We've gone downstream. We've actually brought into the company some distribution. Although we're trying not to compete with our competitors, we find an area where we can do well, where we see a market that's going to be responsive. And that's really the culmination of the new announcement we made for a mill in the South. And as we learned, we have one of the first CSP mills here in the United States at Butler. It's probably one of the first 10 machines in the world like that. And when we were able to acquire Columbus, Mississippi from Severstal several years ago, and again, $1.6 billion investment, We see the evolution and development of technology. So as we look to what our customers need, we also look at markets a little differently. You know, this is a regional play. Being close to our customers is very important because that's the timeliness of today's supply chain. So not only is it a modern mill in respect to technology, there's a lot of engineers in this building working on our project, and I thank you. It's going to be wildly exciting. But the technology is just part of the story. The people we're going to bring to equip that are going to run it like no other mill in the world. And really, locally, we're going to be able to source our materials. We're going to be a great addition to the, you know, wherever we go, have this electric arc furnace is great for the power grid in that local community. So instead of thinking about, you know, the old assets where you had steel cities, unfortunately Pittsburgh, but now you can do it regionally at very low cost. You can be everything you need to be your customers from that one location. So it's really an opportunity to be much closer where the manufacturing is going in this country and where the manufacturing is going in this in North America.
Right. Thank you very much. Conrad, I know you said it was a brutal year, but nonetheless, on the site of a closed coke plant, EVRAZ North America is constructing a new $480 million rail mill in Pueblo, Colorado, capable of producing 600,000 tons of rail. And Conrad, I think you told me that this would be the first solar-powered steel mill in the world, with the sun providing, is it 85 to 90% of your energy needs? And you have other projects in the works. So even though it might have been a mixed or brutal year, you're still investing as well. Tell us about it.
Well, you know, as everyone here has brought up, especially Barry, the objective in all of these investments is how do you become the sustainable, low-cost producer in your market? And none of these investments work unless you're going to be on that left side of the supply curve. And our view is, when we look at each investment we're going to do, are we going to be the low-cost producer to serve our region, our market, and are we going to be able to do the innovation required for the next generation, and have we put in place the sustainability to keep our entire value chain cost to enable us to deliver the lowest option to our customers? And Colorado is a perfect example of that and what we're doing. In terms of building a new rail mill to make 100-meter long rail, which is great. It also enables us to do multiple new generations of innovation on that rail, which we're really excited about as well. But then when you look at electrical costs and a lot of the movement towards renewables and other things, I mean, electrical costs have been actually going up, even as natural gas and coal prices have been going down. And when we looked at it, we said, we're going to make a 20-year investment. How do we know that our electricity rates aren't going to go through the roof? And we worked on it for a long time, and we've got a little bit of extra land out there in Pueblo, Colorado, and we decided to work with the local utility to put in place a very large solar panel field, which will power 80 to 90% of the needs of that entire electric arc furnace, our rod and bar mill, our seamless pipe mill, and our brand new rail mill. So that's really exciting investment. And if you look across our portfolio, we're taking the same approach in terms of that, establishing that low-cost position, whether it's the upgrades to our heat treat system in Portland that we're doing, whether it's the ultrasonic capabilities first in North America, we're putting into Portland, whether it's putting in place in Saskatchewan the ability to make large diameter, heavy wall pipe with grades that are superior to everything else out there. Those are the kind of investments that we're making. Low cost position for the regions we serve, the ability for that technology to deliver long into the future.
Conrad, thank you. Panelists, I have to say that in the 10 years, this is the most exciting. The investments that you all are making are really exciting for the industry, and I think for most of us who have not thought of the steel industry as being particularly responsive to this kind of need. You are going gung-ho, and I know that it sort of begs the question that I wanted to ask next, but I see Scott. You wanted to comment on one of the other?
I did. I didn't want to comment, just an overall comment.
Sure.
Your question was the implications of these investments. And the one thing that none of us have mentioned is what it does for the economy. what it does for employment in those areas we're building all across the United States, what it does to our suppliers, and so on and so forth. So, you know, that has to be a big part of it. You know, when we succeed, everybody succeeds.
The ripple effect.
It's a ripple effect, and so you have to mention
I can't remember
what it does to the economies in the communities out there, and you know, we want to work and live in those communities, and I think it's it's exciting. Let's put it that way.
Thank you. That's a very great point. Let me ask you, I'm just going to open this up to anybody, open-ended question. What has had more influence on your decisions to make these investments? Public policy by the U.S. government or positive steel demand? Yeah,
I would
Barry.
say it's definitely good demand is good for business. And when we see manufacturing coming back to America, it's just outstanding for a lot of the reasons Scott mentions. It's our neighborhoods, it's our communities. But it's also when we see demand, we find a good solution to get product into that marketplace. And that's what opens doors for us. Trade actions come and go, but when you know people are consuming steel and they're your neighbors, that's a good way to grow.
Thank you. How about others? Is it government policy or steel demand or both? I don't know. Johnny.
Well, there's always a nature of both, but I totally agree with Barry. I mean, we are focused on long-term investments that are not just next year, but 10, 20, 30 years out in the future. And I think we're investing because we see demand and demand improving year over year. So we're certainly appreciative of what's taking place in the trade side. We're appreciative and mindful of the cases that we've won in previous years, but we did not rely fully upon 232 when we earmarked $3.5 billion to go forward into the next 30 years with.
How about tax policy, Johnny?
We like tax reform. we absolutely like tax reform. You know, it was a great stimulus to our economy. We need to ensure that we provide a tax platform that allows capital investment and that encourages research and development. Those things are critical across our economy, period.
Anybody else?
Yeah, if I could just add, I mean, this is the answer. The regulation reform and the tax policy, these actions are so critical because let's face it, you know, it is about demand, right? And if we're not manufacturing in North America, we don't need to make steel for North America. And if we have the kind of regulatory environment or the kind of tax policy that's worse for manufacturers in the United States and for us, Canada, than the rest of the world, we're not going to, it doesn't really matter what happens. There's no point in making steel if the customers aren't going to use it. And so it's more than just the tax policy, it's also other regulatory policy that has become much more sane as well. And that's been critical. A lot of these investments that all of us are talking about, I can't speak for everyone, but I know for ours, the regulatory environment has dramatically improved, and it's made those kinds of investments much easier to consider. So it's a big deal, absolutely, not just trade.
Right.
John,
Carol, go ahead.
Yeah, the other point I would make is, and I concur with all of the comments, but the other point I would make is that it's an opportunity for business and all of us to get engaged with legislation, with policy, influencing policy. And so while 232 was certainly helpful to us as a supplier to the industry, Section 301 was specifically related to raw materials for refractories, and the list number 3 is one in particular where we as an industry, the refractory industry, had the opportunity to engage the policy and influence the decisions on what was to remain on that list and what was ultimately removed from the list. And the winning argument was not that we were going to be uncompetitive, but rather that we were simply not going to be able to supply the industry, and therefore that would hurt the steel industry, it would hurt jobs generally. So if you consider that with respect to the reasons for policy, and specifically this administration has been telegraphing the fact that it's all about jobs. It's jobs creation and stability and security of our country, and oh, by the way, fair global trade and leveling the playing field, particularly with China. Consider that backdrop and then the opportunity to influence. The administration is listening, and they've been responsive to us as a refractory industry and certainly as steel as well.
Good. We're going to come back to the trade issues in just a minute, but let me ask one last question with respect to investments, because this is something that I've noticed, that despite record shipments, revenues, profits in 2018 in the steel industry, and all these fabulous capital investment announcements from steel producers, it sometimes seems to me that you get a tepid or mixed result out of Wall Street. Now, what's going on here? Now, for a layperson like me, I would simply tell you Wall Street's crazy, it's irrational, it doesn't make sense, but you're right in the midst of this. What's going on? Is Wall Street anti-steel? I mean, what's your sense of the way Wall Street reacts to the steel industry? Anybody?
Well, I think if it cost $1 billion to make a Starbucks, there wouldn't be one on every corner. So the nature of the capital, I think, is in this day and age is somewhat intimidating when the investment people look at that. But I also think they don't understand the scope of how the industry's changed, and that it really is a high technology industry, and it's not an eyesore. It's a wonderful building material that is infinitely recyclable, and to be able to bring more ways to do great recycling and to reuse our, and low carbon our atmosphere, and to have the lowest energy inputs. That's nothing but good news for the long haul. But sometimes it seems like the dollars of the investment is maybe a little old school.
Yeah. Conrad, thank you, Rick.
I think what it comes down to is this. When we add capacity as an industry, what capacity is going to go away? Is it going to be, are the investors convinced? Is it going to be the imports that are reduced? Because there's still a huge amount of imports, even after 232, into the USA and Canada. And so, are those imports going to go away? Is that what's going to happen? Or are some of the old assets that are high cost, are they going to shut down? And if you look at the history, not enough of those assets that are out of date and cost too much have shut down. And that's what worries investors. And so, when we're looking at the sustainability of our companies, we know we have to invest to put those low-cost assets in place. But at the same time, from an investor perspective, you've got to look at this and say, is demand going to grow enough to cover this, or is what's going to shut down that's going to make this actually work, or can we really displace the imports? And I think the answer is partially that I don't see any reason why we need to assume on this continent that we need to be the massive dumping ground for the rest of the world. Right. And a big chunk of it should be coming out of the imports that are hitting today.
Wall Street, do they misunderstand this?
I think that, if you look at all of us who've run the financials on these things, it's on these kinds of investments, you're looking at, when you're placing those assets, what are your sales 2, 3, 5, 10 years after you've got them going. And right now there's uncertainty in the eyes of Wall Street around whether the imports will actually be reduced in coming in, and then also whether those old assets are going to go away. And you take that uncertainty, and that's a rough equation for Wall Street to handle.
Gotcha. Anyone else want to comment? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I certainly wish I could explain Wall Street. I wouldn't be here this morning probably. But, with that in mind, I think for the industry as a whole, maybe we haven't done as good a job as we need to about educating Wall Street, helping Wall Street understand all the investments that we're making and the cost initiatives and the quality and the opportunity to move up value chains. And the other thing is that the media has placed such emphasis and attention upon the 232 and trade action as being the driver. Well, again, it has been a boost. It has been an aid to what we accomplished in 2018. But the demand, overall economic stability, and the progress within the industry as a whole has had much more influence than what any one trade case or anything specifically around 232 may have done.
Well, let me just segue from that then into the trade discussion, because 6 weeks ago we marked the first anniversary of President Trump's Section 232 actions. Obviously, these were designed based on a national security argument that we need a steel industry. Nobody in this room would dispute that, I suspect. And so the question is, has it done the trick? Has it been helpful? Is it not as important as some might think in improving plant utilization and the like? So let me, again, I'll open this up. Just basically, what do you think about these 232s? Have they done what they were intended to do from your perspective? Have they been helpful? Yeah.
I think from
Barry, go
my
ahead.
standpoint, all of our companies are engaged in trade action. And we're always, and it's been a long, arduous path. And in the past, it was very difficult to show damage. And during the Obama administration, they actually changed the tolerance to proactively help companies before it was too late. So the 232, I appreciate the immediacy of it, but it is a bit clumsy. And I think
Clumsy.
Clumsy. I think quotas in certain select areas probably would have been a more effective tool, but perhaps the timeliness to make that happen up front would have been prohibitive. So the immediacy of 232 to get something established and then go back and do the really hard work that we see happening in the papers today with China, with Korea, with other places, to make sure we have the fair trade that we talk about.
Gotcha. Scott?
Well, I said before, the economy was doing well with some of the deregulation, tax reform, and then the 232 was a kicker to that. I think it absolutely, U.S. Steel thinks it absolutely needed to be done. Talk about, if there was, and I think Wall Street is waiting to see from that standpoint whether or not the administration's going to blink, and I don't think they will. We're confident that if not 232, then some type of quota system there, because any country, whether it's the U.S. or Canada, Mexico, Europe, needs to have sustainable industry. Right? And steel is a big part of that. I don't think we've done a good job advertising that. I think we're doing better. I'd like to bring everybody in to see the new technology that's going in. It's a much newer and sexier steel industry out there, and I think some people are living in the past. But there has to be some fair trade out there to make sure that we can remain competitive in the world against anybody out there.
Anybody else want to comment on this? Go ahead, Johnny.
As we think about the 232, we absolutely, we commend the administration for having done it. One, we needed meaningful action around trade, so we commend the administration for their efforts there. And it has been a benefit to the industry, no question about that. What we have seen in the last year is we saw an 11% drop in imports from 2017 to 2018. About 4 million tons off the pace from the prior year, 90% of which came after 232 came into play. So that's a big benefit. It helped us remove artificially low-priced imports from the market to level the playing field there. The other thing it's done is allow the industry to recover to roughly an 80% utilization mark, which is absolutely critical for our success and our long-term viability. And the other aspect of 232, it has allowed us as an industry and as a country to bring partners to the table and work to negotiate trade programs that would afford us fair trade going forward in the future.
I'm sort of getting a mixed signal here. On one hand, I'm hearing that it's the economy and steel demand that really contributed to your great success this past year, but I'm also now hearing that it's the 232s. Is it time to end 232? Are we at that point yet? Conrad?
If I could go backward, John, on the earlier question, I think, the conundrum is this, right? We have massive overcapacity in Asia and in China.
Right.
And we know this is a capital-intensive industry. The capital is being put down. It's free capital, whereas none of us can have a zero return to our shareholders. And so now the capital's put down, and what do we do about it? Right? What is the solution? And it does look like it has to be a world solution, and in some ways the world solution is happening with what the president did with 232 and with the safeguards that have gone in place throughout the world, which is critical. But at the same time, if we're talking about revitalizing manufacturing in the USA and for our allies who are going to be the ones who fight by our side if we do have trouble, then have we actually produced the lowest cost, most competitive value chain and manufacturing base? And this is the conundrum we have to face. And then if I could just mention in terms of national security, as a former submariner and also as someone who's got a lot of Canadian operations and Canadian relatives, my great uncle fought in the Battle of Bulge as a Canadian doctor with U.S. troops. And if you look at national security, Canada and the United States and national security go arm in arm, and always has been. And that industrial base of Canada and the United States together, if there's ever a shooting match, that's the industrial base that we want to be strong and together on. And so I think that the application of 232 in Canada, though, was actually a misapplication. I understand the negotiating tactic part of it, but now we've got an excellent plan with USMCA. It's time to move beyond that.
I was going to give you a chance to talk about that in a second. Let me ask this question. By the end of March, there were 45,000, more than 45,000 requests had been filed by 778 companies seeking exemption from the steel tariffs. A majority of those get approved. Although interestingly, of those that got approved, only 278 exclusions were approved over the objections of domestic steelmakers. In other words, companies like yours have a veto, pretty much, over these exclusions. How do you feel about that? Have you communicated when you felt some of these exclusions were not necessary, should not have been approved? Should there be foreign steel coming? I mean, we've often said this at various panels about why can't America produce 100% of its steel needs? What's your thoughts? Anyone? Johnny?
Well, John, I don't think we've necessarily been given a veto. I think what we've done is had an opportunity to file an objection, and the facts were the facts.
Sure.
And they got the decision that was warranted based on the facts. So I guess we would love to have the veto power. But, from a Nucor perspective, I mean, we have looked at the exclusions as probably a necessary element of the policy. We've responded there and filed, and in general have not worked to get objections to exclusions where we did not produce a product or would soon be producing those products. Now, with that in mind, we've also filed objections where we found that the exclusion would undermine the intent of 232, where, specifically around the hot end of the manufacturing process, slabs coming into the U.S. We have filed objections on that aspect of it because we know the importance and the criticality of having the hot end in play for our national security.
Gotcha. Good. Barry, I think you told me that your company, you don't object unless you can make the product.
Yeah, we did not want to harm our customer base. And we need them to be healthy long term. So if we commercially are selling a product, then we'll object. But if it's things we cannot make, we learn from it. And we decide, is that a market where we should expand? But we didn't object short term. And I think all of this is somewhat in a vacuum of demand is growing. So as demand grows, we have to make sure as an industry we're offering the right products. So when we looked at the exemption process, and it's very laborious, we looked at it and said, light gauge, very light gauge steels are part of that, part of the system that we don't create, but we consume. So how do we invest better to get there? So as the North American market increases its own demand, which is a great thing for all of us, how do we best meet that demand? And there's always going to be some imports, and I think we can all live with that if they're coming into the country for the right reasons. And they're sustainable in the sense that perhaps it is a specialty item that we haven't invested for, or it's a customer relationship with their own companies. It's just a matter when it's injurious and it's coming in at such a low price that it really damages the whole market that action has to be taken.
Gotcha. Scott, did I see your hand up
Yeah,
there?
no, that's a great point. The whole exemption is very complicated.
Yes.
But very simple on the other hand, right? Can anyone on this stage and or anybody else out there make it in the United States? And we believe, where we believe that we can, whether it's semi-product all the way through OTCG, where we believe we object. And I think that's the right thing to do. To Barry's point, lighter gauges, heavier gauges, that's part of our strategy and part of what's allowed us to making these investments will allow us to be able to make those for our customers in the future, right? So we're doing it both. We're doing it all.
Yeah, good. Conrad, I wanted to ask, did you want to comment on this?
Well, I just wanted to get back to the exclusion. I mean, look, again, if we think that as a steel industry we can disadvantage our customers economically and that that's a winning strategy, it won't be. And when you look at the amount of FE units that come out of essentially the USA, it's not going to be enough for growing demand in the future for those FE units that are truly the world low cost. We can't be in a situation where finished products are cheaper everywhere else because we have to pay more for our iron units and the logistics to get it to our end customers. The value chain has to be competitive. And whether we like it or not, those FE units coming from places like Australia and Brazil with massive mines, et cetera, those are pretty low cost options. And my view is you can draw the line at iron ore, you can draw the line at DRI, you can draw the line at slab. I thought we drew the line, in my opinion, in the wrong place. By drawing the line and making slab still part of the tariffs, we're hurting a lot of American jobs as a result, and we're raising the cost for our customers. So that's just to throw that one out there.
Thank you for those comments. I wanted to give you a chance, since EVRAZ has, actually you've got more facilities in Canada than in the US, right? So I wanted to give you a chance to talk about the US-Mexico-Canadian agreement because I noted that both the Canadian, I think the trade minister, and Senator Chuck Grassley, who's an Iowa Republican and chair of the Senate Finance Committee, has basically said that before the U.S. ratifies this agreement, he says the steel tariffs must be lifted before Congress will ratify, will approve. Do you agree? How do you feel about that?
So, I clearly do agree. And if you look at it, first of all, from the basic economics of it, NAFTA, Canada, Mexico, USA, is the secret weapon for making manufacturing in this continent incredibly strong and prosperous. This is where, when we invest in our continent, when it's our logistics and our people going back and forth across the border, that builds our economy all the way through, from marketing, through product development, engineering, R&D. That's the difference. When it goes completely overseas, it's gone. And so that's the secret for us having an incredibly low-cost value chain that wins in a capitalist world. And absolutely, Canada has to be a major part of that. And if you look at how it's played out for Canada, for EVRAZ, 300 to 500,000 tons of steel, typically going in both directions. Some years a little bit more. Same thing actually for Canada and U.S. steel trade. Over time, it's been basically equal. It is actually exactly the example of the kind of trade that we want as USA is with Canada, where we have similar standard of living, where Canadians, where 30 million of them, half of them are going to Florida and Arizona every year, spending money back in the United States. It's great business for USA, it's great business for Canada, and it's great for our national defense.
So let me ask you, any of your colleagues here, are you willing to lift the tariffs on steel with respect to Canada?
Well, I think there has to be some kind of we have to make sure that the backdoor channels to the countries around the world.
The circumvention issue.
Circumvention's a big one that we're still working on. We have great support from the government. But if Canada and Mexico don't have borders to Chinese or to illegally dump steel or artificially low priced, and it just sneaks into the NAFTA or the USMCA agreement, it undermines that effectiveness. So I think the 232 was a way to say, hey, you have to put up some trade fences. I think we saw similar action in Europe as a result of that. And Europe's going through that same thing as their economy cools. It's important that we make sure we keep protecting against what we wanted to do.
Yeah. Scott or Johnny, do you have a thought about this?
I think Conrad and Barry made excellent points on that. NAFTA was beneficial to the industry. I think the USMCA can be beneficial to the industry. Some of the provisions that are already integrated into USMCA, such as rules of origin and the currency provisions, are good for the industry. They're also good to set the template for future trade agreements with other countries. But we absolutely have to put in place a mechanism to ensure that circumvention or those transshipments do not happen. And if we can get there, we support it because we believe there is value to the North American channel. We participate in Canada. We participate in Mexico. We're investing with JFE down in Mexico today. So we see the full channel, but we absolutely have to ensure that we put something in place to protect those transshipments.
Yeah, John, I know that you like us to disagree, but I think we all agree on that. There can't be any circumvention.
I do like them to disagree.
Can't be any circumvention. That's really the key to this, and we think and hope that the administrations can come to an agreement there. And it may not be tariffs. We're supplying a lot of automotive steel up into Canada, so we're feeling the same thing coming back and forth. But we have to make sure that we have those. I guess not the possibility for the circumvention, number one. And number two, whether it's 232, whether it's tariffs, we think the administrations on both sides will come to an agreement. And we're hopeful of that. I think they have a better chance than maybe our own governments coming together and making an agreement. But we're excited about that.
Conrad, are you happy with this agreement?
Very, very much so. No, I entirely agree. I mean, it is.
We all agree.
The issue of the transshipments or others, essentially, if it can't be the USA only with 232, Canada and Mexico also need the same kind of safeguards in place to make it work. Absolutely.
Good. I have a final question before we move to a special video question. But I did want to give each of us a quick second, if you want, to talk about China. We always mention China in these town halls. And, despite all these reports of a slowing Chinese economy, nonetheless, and apparently the slowest rate of growth in the last 5 years, nonetheless, during the first quarter of this year, China produced a record 231 million tons of steel, up 10% from a year ago. That's a so-called slowing economy. So moving forward, what worries you most about China? Johnny.
John, your lead in there is perfect, because what we've historically seen from China is that when their economy slows, they don't stop producing. They continue to produce, and they attack every single border across the world that's possible. So the most concern I have, and maybe the most credibility to keeping 232 in place, is to ensure that when the economy in China slows down, we don't become bombarded with imports of Chinese material here in the States or the transshipment that occurs. Yeah. What we essentially need is we need China at the table. China needs to get to a policy in place, a trade policy in place. They need to quit propping up their government-supported steel industry, eliminate the inefficient plants, and let market forces guide trade.
Amen.
As succinct as you can get.
Yeah, you have not.
Scott,
you haven't seen the consolidation in China that we have seen over the last 50 years here in the United States, good, bad, or indifferent. And we looked at it in 2017 when the prices were rising. I don't think China made a dime on anything that they exported out of their country. It's very similar to what we want in North America. High job rate, low unemployment, they're not making any money, subsidies, et cetera. I could go on and on. Everybody here, we've been in a trade war with China forever, whether we like it or not, and we have to do something about it, and we fully support what the administration is doing.
Barry, what worries you most about China going forward?
Well, I think, Steel Dynamics has a broad platform. So we have a recycling company, OmniSource, and they're the largest non-ferrous material recovery in the country. And 2 years ago, almost everything they sold downstream went back to China, and China just closed the doors to everything. They don't hesitate. There's no political discussion in the paper about their action, their green sword, whatever they called it. And I think not having seen it firsthand, but knowing a lot of people that have been to China, the people in China need to expect more of their country, of their industry. They need a cleaner environment. America, Canada, Mexico, our citizens wouldn't put up with this. And I think that will eventually also come true. But there's such a big part of the economy that when that big bear rolls over one way or another, it has a lot of unintended consequences. And I think, from being able to recycle like our OmniSource does, to all of a sudden the doors are closed and you have to find a chain to do that. We need something long-term sustainable, and that's another reason why their own policies can't be just government dictated. There has to be some kind of demand response. There has to be capital response. They have to be operating under an economy that makes sense, not just a predatory mercantile economy.
Good, thank you. Conrad, did you want to say anything about China?
I mean, it's the same worry, that reframing the same worry as before. China's it's a major issue, and the capital investment's already down now, and the massive overcapacity is already there. And so now we really are in a difficult spot because that essentially will feed lowering cost for the value chain for manufactured goods in China. And I think that we are in a long-term, and not just us, but the rest of the world is going to be in a long-term situation with China where there's going to have to be, where trade will have to be addressed because it's not going to be enough to stop them from exporting steel, because if it just comes in terms of our customers' products, then that doesn't work either. So it's a long-term issue.
We're going to give Carol the last word on China.
All right, no problem. No, I think that there's an ongoing debate by the Chinese with the rest of the world as to whether or not they are or should be declared a market-based economy. And to me, this is a global issue. It's not U.S. versus China. Certainly, the U.S. administration has taken a leadership role with respect to equalizing the playing field with China. That said, the rest of the world has to hop on board and be a part of the solution as well. I've been traveling to China for the past 20 years, and in that time, I've seen cities. I mean, you all have done this. I mean, cities from dirt roads to highways and infrastructure that seems to literally appear overnight. And China, the expectations are increasing. One can argue the basis for the Chinese government responding the way it has with respect to cracking down environmentally on their production infrastructure. In the refractory industry alone, there's thousands of tiny refractory companies that set up shop and pollute and do all kinds of awful things, and they've been shut down. Now, whether or not that's for the right reasons or, I mean, who knows, but ultimately there's actions being taken, and some would argue that in part the government is finally responding to a growing population that is discontent and arguably no longer going to stand for the practices, whether they be environmentally polluting practices or, quite frankly, basic health and safety for employees. It's if they want to be part of a global economy, if they want to be considered a truly market economy, China has to step up and do its part in becoming a global competitor worthy of this size that they've built. They are huge. But long term, that's not sustainable, as we've been talking about our infrastructure not being sustainable if we're not cost competitive. Point being, it's a global problem. We need to resolve the issues, and hiding from it or continuing to disregard China is no way to be looking at it. The Chinese are clearly aimed at us, and we need to respond equally.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you, panel. Ron, as we transition to a discussion about markets, I understand we have a video question from a special guest.
So we talked a lot about imports and the concern with imports, and we seem to have some good ideas as an industry, but it's important that we convey that knowledge and the education to our elected leaders in Washington. And we have one of those here that would like to learn a little bit more.
Hello, I'm Connor Lamb, the U.S. representative for Pennsylvania's 17th District. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to serve as chairman of the Congressional Steel Caucus for the 116th Congress. I like to believe I was appointed as chair, not because Pittsburgh has a 6-time Super Bowl champion football team named after this industry, but because of how critical the steel industry is to southwestern Pennsylvania and to our nation. I want to thank AIST for inviting me to be here with you all today, and a special thank you to the panel and all of you in the audience who are champions of the steel industry. The steel industry's pivotal role in our country's history and economy is undeniable, But this is also a critical time for this industry. The steel industry in the USA currently has strong momentum which has encouraged significant investments in new capacity and new technology that will bolster our competitive position on the world stage. My question today can actually help impact the work I am doing for you all on the Steel Caucus. What specific policies relative to trade and regulatory oversight can the U.S. government work toward to sustain this positive momentum? I want to thank AIST for this opportunity, and I look forward to receiving your feedback. Thank you.
All right, well, let's open up the Congressman's question, and I'm going to make it a little broader. With respect to the U.S. government and Congress, can you name one policy that you think would be most positive for the steel industry, one thing that Congress and the U.S. government could do that would be helpful? Johnny.
Let's do something on infrastructure.
Infrastructure. Yeah, okay. We're going to come back to that one.
Yeah.
And just very briefly, one word, 2 words, you can take 3 or 4.
Trade.
Trade policy, specific, what would you want?
Fair trade.
Fair trade. Good. One specific policy that could come out of the Congress, the government, that would be helpful for the steel industry.
I agree
What are we going to tell
Johnny.
Barry, what are we going to tell?
Infrastructure, for sure. I think
Infrastructure.
we all see it.
Got it.
Because it's covered, I won't say infrastructure, but really the legal framework for infrastructure is really going to be critical for us. The legal framework.
Legal framework.
What China does with infrastructure has built, massively reduced their transportation, logistics costs, improved standard of living. We can't build anything in here with it getting legally passed without too many issues.
With all the rules and rigmarole. Gotcha. Carol.
Can I say more than one word?
Yes.
Okay. I would agree with infrastructure, but to me, it's the complexity behind it, and the discussion I'd like to have is more about policy making and the way things get done or don't get done, because ultimately that's where things tend to
Do you mean
fail,
the failure of
to
Congress
break
and the
down.
President to agree
Yes.
on anything?
Yes. And yes.
Yeah, that's a little frustrating.
Just a little bit.
Wasn't sure you're going to allow the hyphen in between there.
Yeah.
I get that, okay?
John got special treatment.
Hyphens are
A little more than a hyphen. So let's begin with infrastructure. As you know, last week, President Trump and the Democratic leaders seemed to agree on a $2 trillion infrastructure spending bill to repair roads, bridges, mass transit, broadband. I mean, you name it. They had something in there, or they were talking about something. But almost immediately, the Republican leaders stepped in and said, no. This is too expensive. Won't happen. On Saturday, the president tweeted, some of you may, I follow all his tweets. Some days there are a lot of them. He tweeted, quote, "There is nothing easy about a USA infrastructure plan, but I am looking hard at a bipartisan $1 to $2 trillion badly needed." End of tweet. So, I mean, you all have your government contacts, your resources. Are any of you optimistic that we're going to see an infrastructure bill in 2019?
Well, I think there's some states that are doing it. You know, Indiana, where we're based, and we have a lot of operations, more than half of our team. Indiana, even though it's a one-sided majority politically, did a hard thing and increased taxes for infrastructure.
Well, now, Barry, let me follow up on that, because I think Pennsylvania did the same thing with a hike in the gasoline tax. That it generates about $1 billion a year for transportation, building, roads, bridges, and the like, repairs in this Commonwealth. Do you think state infrastructure plans are the way to go as opposed to the federal?
I feel like there's a lot more accountability when the state's doing it, because the state's going to look at the people, they're going to talk to the communities out there. You know, you see these stories where kids fill potholes, you know, in their streets. You know, so when you have a local government, and you know, a lot of ways that's, you know, the more rural you get, the more you do have that very small governments and somewhat regional governments in the country. They take care of what's important because it affects everybody's day. So I think states have to be involved somehow. Now, I would like to see the states get some support from the federal government, because some of these projects are massive, and there are needs to do big bridge replacements, big bridge work in some areas, whole new construction. So just blacktopping a road isn't an infrastructure repair. It's not changing the game. To Conrad's point, we got to do some meaningful, development of our infrastructure.
Right. Others? Any of you? Scott? Are you optimistic? Do you think something's going to happen?
No.
No.
I think I would like to tell everybody that I am. There's been just a lot of rhetoric out there on it. Whether or not the two sides of the aisle can come together, you want to turn it off sometimes. Your tweets is. Would it be beneficial? Is it the next step? We talked about the one-word answer -infrastructure, right? It's extremely, extremely important, I think, for this economy to continue the way it is, and for the industry in whole, it would help. But I don't really see it happening with the bipartisanship there. So I'm sorry if I'm ruined anybody's day, but
What a downer.
It may just be reality.
Downer.
I mean, is there any optimism at all?
I would
about
love it too, John.
Yeah,
Let's
I
put
know.
it that way.
Right.
I share the lack of optimism. I won't call it pessimism yet because there is some good energy there for sure. But it's another part of that secret weapon for us as North America, right? I mean, if it's going to be cheaper for everywhere else in the world to take goods and move them for 500 miles, if it's going to be 3 or 4 times more expensive in this country, if our truckers are going to sit in 6 hours of traffic to get from point A to point B, if our infrastructure is falling down so that what people do with their standard of living and lives is worse, I mean, this is a major issue. And we really do need, I think we need a visionary kind of response to it that actually, it will not only improve the standard of living, but it will make all of us more cost competitive. And instead of having to compete with ships that are cheaper to go from halfway around the world, when for going 200 miles in our own country costs more than that, we're going to be in trouble.
I think everybody seems to be in agreement up for an infrastructure bill. It's always the question of how to pay for it. Just the other day, Monday, I think the chairman of the U.S. House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee was here in Pittsburgh, Congressman Peter DeFazio from Oregon. He was here, so a bunch of us asked him questions, got a chance to talk to him. And his solution to raising the money is fairly straightforward, and that is, he says, the federal gasoline tax has not gone up since 1993. He proposes raising that tax by $0.015 a gallon. That's all. $0.015 a gallon, and he said that would help. That would raise at least part of the $1 trillion that is necessary. But again, getting the political will to do even that often seems impossible. Any last thoughts on this? I'm going to move to another product. Yeah, Carol.
And it really does get back to the frustration I think we're all expressing, which is, and a recommendation for Connor is to try to put the politics aside and take a lesson from business and think about it, get the right minds around the table that have the right interests, and in cases like this, opposing interests, and put pen to paper, marker to board, and work out a strategic plan. I mean, there's a reason business succeeds. It's because we plan. We have tactics that support those plans.
That's great advice.
I wasn't sure if we answered his question.
Heaven forbid. Well, I don't think we did, except that would be my suggestion, is to take a role and try to get people around the table, and no media, no tweets, just deal with the hard stuff and
John,
confront the critical issues.
Are we going to make sure that Mr. Lamb gets those
Yes,
answers?
sir.
So 232, stand fast, or something very similar,
Right.
quoted. Infrastructure, pass an infrastructure bill, and stop and punish circumvention.
Yeah.
Okay? Relay that to
As soon as we're done, I'll text
And
them.
301. I would add 301 to that.
301.
Yeah.
All right, let me move to another product area real quick. Non-residential construction spending has been above, in the U.S., $750 billion on an annualized basis, the highest rates recorded by the Census Bureau since they began tracking this metric. So how is your company taking advantage of this particular product area? Non-residential construction, where do you see it going? Can it get strong? Forget the infrastructure bill for a moment. Where are we, as hard as that is, where are we headed? Anybody?
Well, at Steel Dynamics, we have one of our platforms is the New Millennium Building Systems, and that is largely non-res construction. And we see it as a great opportunity for the steel industry to continue to bring products to the marketplace that are actually performing superior to what other products are available. So not just through our New Millennium buildings, but also through our flat roll division, we've invested in painted steel products, pre-paint, because we see that as a really good alternative in the future. And there's a lot of good cases where when you replace a roof now or you replace siding, you can go with a steel product and it's going to perform superior to anything else that's on the marketplace. So just recently we had acquired a downstream distributor of painted construction products. We see that as a part of our future, but we also see it as a real sustainable approach for all of us to do construction, to go out in there with a recyclable product that, you know, once we galvanize it and paint it, that's a 50-year product. So it's not how many layers of roof are on that house when you buy it, it's, oh, it's got a steel roof, I probably don't have to mess with it. So I mean, it's a good thing in the evolution of our construction and of our products we choose. And it's also, again, back to the source locally. By having a distribution system around the country of smaller facilities that are operating at peak economic value, even though they're smaller, they can bring a product that's a locally sourced product in the lead organizations. They score very well because it's a recycled product with a great lifespan and it's regional.
Great. Let me, Johnny, I'll give you a second. Let me toss in two other product areas because I know we're going to run short of time, and I want to make sure that if anyone wants to address these. The energy side, oil and gas rigs, we're now averaging, I think, 1,000 rigs in operation, the total count. It's on track in this year to be the highest count since 2014. I know it was lower last year when we met. And I guess the question is, how's that impacting the steel industry? And then the other is automotive, of course. So we have construction, we have energy, and we have automotive. And I'm hearing rumblings from my friends in the auto industry that about auto sales this year are likely to be down, not a very good first quarter, likely to be down over last year's 70.2 million autos. And I guess sort of my question in that area is always, has high-strength steel, have we beat out aluminum now? Is that battle over? I mean, where are we in the automotive side? So those three areas, I'm just opening this up to any comments from anybody about construction, energy, or automotive. Johnny, you wanted to say something.
So I'll go back to the non-res. I mean, non-res has always been an important business segment for Nucor and remains that today. You know, Barry touched on many things that we likewise at Nucor are looking for how we create value in that segment, move up the value chain. Our MBQ expansion at Kankakee, the $180 million we're spending there is a positive influence on that. As well as in late 2016 and early 2017, we acquired some HSS tubing as well as electrical conduit to provide us a better foothold and a place into the market on the construction side. So that is an important segment to us. You talk about energy. We believe energy has found a better balance in the marketplace. We're investing in our Kentucky sheet mill today to be able to better supply that. And I think it's a portfolio of products that we see in the energy sector, whether it's wind, solar, or the exploration of natural gas. So it gives us a lot of opportunities to participate in a number of facets across that industry. And automotive, you get a lot of, I guess, channeling of what's going on. It's an emotional area in the market oftentimes. I think the automotive sector is going to remain a positive sector. We, in fact, are investing. I mean, we've got our joint venture going on down in Mexico with JFE. We also have investments going on at Hickman to improve the advanced high-strength steel offering. Have we beat out aluminum? I would say that we're in the process of ensuring that everyone understands how good steel is compared to aluminum. And when you think about that comparison, I mean, on a value cost equation, we win. We absolutely win on the value cost equation. In place of how we handle it at the factories and the tooling necessary there, the repairs that go on outside of it, and the simple upfront cost of steel versus the aluminum. The second way that we have identified in beating out aluminum is in the safety. Advanced high-strength steel, time and time again, proves beneficial in safety tests. So we're winning on that front. And lastly, on that sector, in beating out aluminum, is the environmental footprint. It is without question that steel continues to demonstrate that we're superior in the environmental footprint to what aluminum is going into the auto industry. So I think we've got a lot of positives going on in all three sectors, and I'm encouraged by it.
Great, great. Scott, automotive is part of your portfolio.
Well, again, Johnny and I agree on most of that.
Is that hyphenated?
Yeah, you know, construction and I would say non-res and residential, we absolutely see a positive trend there. And we see it in our order book, we see it in our profitability off of those units that serve that industry. To the points that were made earlier, steel is the only material out there that is 100% recyclable. You know, I just spent the last 4 years running our European operations, and every residential house in Central and Eastern Europe has a beautiful, you can make it anything you want, steel roof on it, right? So from an environmental standpoint, it's huge. I'm not sure why we haven't caught on to that yet in the States.
A steel roof.
What?
Steel roof on residential.
Steel roof, and it looks like terracotta. You can make it look any way you want. You know, sure. I'm sure that Barry's group is into that with their profiles, right? Absolutely. Metal buildings and so on and so forth. So that's all good news, and we are seeing the benefits of that. From the energy standpoint, I don't think you can just look at the number of rig counts anymore as a barometer. The technology now, drilling sideways, drilling up and down, and I don't claim to be an OTCG expert. We have those in our company, but that is a very valuable part of our business. You know, we are R&D is working on premium connections to make sure that we can go deeper, wider, and those types of things. And that business, I think, is stable now and will continue to grow. But I wouldn't necessarily look at the rig counts on that side of it. And then the automotive business. We believe that it's still going to be a good year for the automotive, and I'll let them answer that question. Last year was near, if not a record year for automotive builds. I think that if you just look at the first quarter profitabilities, I think they're still going to have a good year. I think if the government does some of the things that we talked about, continue to push the economy forward, they could see those builds get back to those near record, but I think they're going to have a very, very good year. And you know, we're investing in all of those segments, and especially in automotive, we're going to have the newest state-of-the-art, newest technology, Generation 3, our XG3. I can't talk about it enough. I'm so excited at our joint venture in ProTech. It's our third line there with the latest technology, and then with the technology we just announced here in Pittsburgh, we're going to be able to supply the heaviest and the lightest grades of steel, lighter, stronger, faster for the automotive guys. So we're extremely happy about it.
Right. Good. We're going to segue to another video question in just a minute, but I have to ask you about this product. I didn't know much about glulam. Maybe those in the audience may be much more familiar with the whole concept of wood replacing steel. You know, we've had a number of discussions over the years about aluminum, but the notion of wood replacing steel through these glulam beams, and then I catch a statement from the New York City mayor, Bill de Blasio, saying, quote, "We are going to introduce legislation to ban the glass and steel skyscrapers that have contributed so much to global warming. They have no place in our city or on our earth anymore." No place for steel in New York? I mean, well, give me a break. But the whole thing of, can you really replace steel with wood? I know you can now, with glulam, you can go up a number of stories, but it's hard for me to imagine building an Empire State Building out of wood. Is this the new competition, though? Is this something that the steel industry should be concerned about? Anybody?
So
Conrad?
Anecdotally, I can say that as we've been tearing up the land and demoing what was our old coke mills out in Pueblo, Colorado, and we have found that the mill started construction in 1872. And so we have found quite a few redwood pipes in there as we've dug that up. So perhaps the mayor's thinking that would be the kind of direction we
Back to the future.
Back to the future. No, I mean, I think that part is you know, it obviously doesn't make any sense, neither economics nor recycling. I don't know how big a trend it really is for the business.
Are any of you guys worried about glulam? Is this something we should be thinking about?
Well, I think I was quite surprised at the announcement by the mayor in New York. We've developed some technology to be able to make high-strength threaded rebar that's going into high-rises they're building right now in New York City.
I think they did try to walk it back, or some of the folks in New York did try to walk back that statement a little bit.
Things always change, you know, and you know, I would say right now, yeah, there probably is a market space that's under a little bit of attack by glulam, and there's always going to be materials to compete. But you know, to Johnny's point, our industry is incredibly sustainable when you look at the cost. And everybody at this expo here, everything you talk about, all the equipment designers, energy efficiency, safety, how do we build quicker, how do we get machines quicker? So we have a lot of good minds working towards making sure steel remains in the forefront of all of the choices you have.
Right. Ron, as we move into a discussion of digitalization and Industry 4.0, I understand you have a video question from a special guest who just might like to be part of a high-tech manufacturing company.
Sure. So the industry really can't grow without a workforce that's interested in and prepared to meet the challenges of 21st century steelmaking. Let's hear from a promising young future engineer searching for a high-tech, dynamic industry to launch her career.
Hello, my name is Isabella Mendoza, and I am a senior majoring in materials science and engineering at Drexel University in Philadelphia. My question for the panel is, as an engineering student, I hope to have many career options available to me after I graduate, such as those in the fields of automotives, robotics, energy, and steel. Please give me your best elevator pitch as to why I should pursue a career in the steel industry.
Great question. So panelists, tell Ms. Mendoza, why should she pursue a career in steel as opposed to, say, robotics? And in answering her, can you give us an example of how your company is succeeding at deploying evolutionary digital technology? Anybody?
Yeah, I'll start.
Scott, go ahead from
I
US
give
Steel.
her a couple answers. Everything, outside of mentioning steel, the other two industries that she talked about all deal with steel, right? So she should be on the cutting edge in front of that in a supplier. You know, when we look at that, that's a huge subject, I'm sure, for everybody, or a topic for everybody here and a lot of the people in the audience today. And I look at that as another kind of two-headed snake. That it's great that people that are coming up in the new generation have a lot of opportunities. You know what that means? That means our economy is doing strong, and there's a lot of opportunities out there, right? We are just as competitive in trying to get the most skilled and talented workforce that we can, and it's not always easy with a great economy with the employment rate so low. We're doing a couple of things. We number one, are investing back into our employees that we have to increase the talent that we have a great talent pool at US Steel. We're making sure that we drive that forward, and we're bringing in the best and the brightest that we can find out there in the industry. We're working with universities across where all of our facilities are, including over in Europe, with the universities over in Europe to even give them the curriculum that we're looking for. These are the types of skills that we're looking for, both from a management and a rank and file type standpoint. We're also really being aggressive at US Steel now with our diversity and inclusion piece of it. Okay?
Yeah, we're going to come to these issues.
We think that's
just
extremely important for us to move forward.
Great, thank you, Scott. So how about others? A quick elevator pitch on why Ms. Mendoza should join your high-tech company. What's high-tech about you? Why you versus the others?
Well, I think
Barry from
in general in the
Steel
industry,
Dynamics.
we have the cutting edge technology. So any one of our steel facilities, when you go into them, there's state-of-the-art hydraulics, state-of-the-art microprocessors, electrical drive systems, power distribution, you know, the environmental control systems we have in our plants, as well as our water systems. So as a young technical professional coming into the workplace, you can go to one facility and see everything there is to offer. And there's You know, I think this generation hasn't figured out yet, and I have a couple of kids in this group. Teamwork is a very important thing. We think better than any one of us alone. So when you get in the team and you're encouraged and you have people to support you, what you become is so much better than you would have been sitting home programming in the basement. So coming into an environment when you have people of all walks of life, and I say that as a person that was educated in Cleveland steel mills by millwrights and people that were true craftsmen, that experience is invaluable to developing what you want to be as an adult. So mills, we have that.
Mills have it. Okay. Yeah, Carol.
So at HarbisonWalker, we're investing in technology in a number of ways. Certainly at our customers, we're deeply embedded in our customer facilities and investing heavily in technology through sensors, lasers, 3D imaging to replicate the units at the customer site in a safe way. And that's certainly a very compelling opportunity for someone who wants to be on the journey with us from what has been traditionally an experience-based decision-making process to data-driven decision-making. And that really, for us, is how we're reinventing ourselves as a 150-year-old refractory company. Yes, we still make wonderful products, and ultimately those products are installed and perform a function at a customer's site, but how we're achieving that technology development with next-gen technologies, and not only on the products themselves, but how they work in application is through data-driven technologies, which is very exciting for folks not only who are just recently graduating, but those who have been around for a number of years and had opportunities to work in our plants. And so we're very excited. But I can also say, hey, by the way, everybody, all these guys need us. So if you want job stability and a wonderful place to work, and that really is what we're working on.
Go to refractories. That's where it's at.
Go to refractories. We're hiring. HarbisonWalker's hiring.
Nice.
Johnny.
Nicely played. John, I think it's a wonderful time for young engineers to be entering the marketplace. I mean, one, they're going to be in high demand. You know, you come to a company like Nucor, you get the opportunity to be part of 26,000 men and women that every single day is challenged and empowered to make a difference in the processes and products that we make. You look at it from a standpoint that innovation is part of our DNA, and we're at the renaissance now of the steel industry. We are not the steel of 100 years ago or 50 years ago. We are a high-tech company that's driven about automation, artificial intelligence, that's driven with a passion to take the data and extract it and turn it into useful information to make meaningful decisions. So improvement in process, without question, the improvement in products and the ability to better service our team and service our customers, what a wonderful time to be part of the steel industry.
You bet.
I mean, this leads right into this last questions that we're going to deal with, which is workforce development, because that elevator pitch that you gave to Ms. Mendoza, obviously there are lots of people who are going to need to come into the steel industry because we, frankly, are losing the baby boomers. Baby boomers my age are retiring at over 10,000 people a day. A day, 10,000 people. I did this last year, and I'm going to do it again right now before we go to our last question. So let me just ask you, you know, the baby boomers are those born before 1965. So if you, like me, were born before 1965, would you raise your hand? Any up here on the panel? None of you on the panel. all you youngins. All right. So, you know, sometime over the next 10 years, you don't want to admit it. All right. If you're born between 1965 and 1980, this is the so-called Generation X. 1965 and 1980, raise your hand. Is everyone on the panel? All right. These are the new leaders of the steel industry. If you are born after 1980, raise your hands. Ah, look at that, lots. And here's a question. If you were born 1995 or later, anyone 1995 or later in this room?
There's a few.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Generation Z. The new generation. That's great. Ron, can we go to the last question here?
Okay, so relative to the whole issue of workforce, we have this one last video question from an AIST member who's curious about a particular aspect of the industry's recruiting efforts.
Hi, my name is Amy Beard, Market Manager of Steel Hot Rolling for Quaker Chemical. Quaker is a leading provider of specialty and custom formulated process fluids for the steel industry. In my 17 plus years in the industry, the aging workforce has become an increasingly important topic of discussion. Looking towards the workforce of tomorrow, I think it's important to consider the fact that, based on government data, the primary metals and metal fabricated manufacturing industry is currently over 85% white and over 82% male. With that in mind, and noting that hiring has become increasingly difficult for the trades and manufacturing in general due to the tightening labor market, I'd like to know what efforts you have put forth to ensure diversity in your recruitment efforts. Thank you.
Another great question, this one from Ms. Beard. Panelists, what are your companies doing with respect to recruiting the future workforce for your companies? And are you doing anything in particular to recruit women and people of color? Anybody?
Well, I think when
Barry?
Steel Dynamics is recruiting, we've really introduced a great internship program where we can bring in 60 plus students a year. And we really are searching hard to make sure we're getting STEM engineers, scientists, mathematicians, people that can really do the work of tomorrow. For us, it's definitely an added bonus if we bring diversity to the pool, but the pool we're looking at right now is a shrinking pool. So I think it's very important to bring in the talent wherever we can get it, but more and more, by having a mill floor and operations are more inclusive, I think it's creating an atmosphere where you definitely see young metallurgists, they're ladies in our profession, and it's definitely more so than when I was starting in the industry in 1990. When I hired into the steel company I started with, there was 100 engineers that started, and there was one lady in that group. So I would tell you today we're doing better, but the pool of applicants is really something that concerns me, and that's getting more people into those fields, whatever it may be, is just as important.
Are you basically saying that the pool of potential employees, to use Ms. Beard's statistics, are largely 85% white and 82% men, so it makes it harder to recruit among that? Is that what you're saying?
In STEM education in general, I think it's hard to get ladies involved, and I have a daughter that's in that field, and it's predominantly a male atmosphere, but
which would suggest that we need to get women involved in these from the get-go.
At a very young age. At a very young age, we have to have STEM outreach to young ladies that are going through, junior high school and high school to get them interested in those professions.
Right. I'm going to give Carol the last word on this. I want her to hear what you guys say first. Okay. So I saw all your hands go up. Conrad, go ahead.
I'll be brief, but no, I mean our because of the difficulty in going up and down that we've been through, training is one of our #1 strategic initiatives over this year and over the last couple of years. And what we've really found is that we've now been able to bring in a lot more people. It used to be we brought in people who were farmers, or we brought in people who had been mechanics somewhere else and had a lot of that experience. Of course, we love it when we get people from the nuclear Navy and other sources like that. But we're bringing a lot of people right now who are former baristas. And,
Baristas,
yeah.
Baristas.
Yeah, so I mean, and you know what? They're super smart, hardworking, but they have no industrial experience whatsoever. And we're spending the time to train people with those backgrounds as to how to be in the manufacturing environment. And for many of them, they love it, right? Because, people don't see it now going through high school, just how cool it is to actually make something at the end of the day and see your result physically change whatever it is you're producing. And just take, for example, in our Portland spiral mill that we've been restarting, I think right now, the number is we're something like 30% women in that new mill we're starting up. And it's been a terrific experience. We were doing focus groups, and one of the women said, "Oh, we're just over the moon at this kind of experience to see what it's like to actually make something."
30% women.
So it's
Yeah, wow.
making progress.
Scott, I saw your hand on it, Johnny.
Well, I mentioned a couple things that we're doing, and being the executive sponsor and champion of our diversity and inclusion program, those numbers are sobering, right? I mean, in the 80%, and I think we talked about, or I heard some things about the internships and really marketing our industry a little better out there. I think those are all good ways to do it, but we are going to need to have more women and more minorities out there in our field. The technology is there. The technology is very exciting, but we need to go out and sell it a little more. The other thing that one of the other things that we're doing is we've totally overhauled our benefits. They were steel benefits from an all male industry, years ago, and we just rolled out a whole new benefit program for both parental leave, in vitro fertilization, adoption, and sort of benefits that go right back to our culture of caring for all of our employees, and we think that will attract some more in those fields.
That's a very important point. I hope everybody caught that. I work for CBS, and CBS just did the same thing, and it's absolutely amazing what they're doing with respect to making it a whole lot easier for women to be part of the workforce, given the special issues that are involved. So thank you for raising that. Johnny, last word before we let Carol have the real last word.
Real last word. It's been interesting this morning to hear the amount of time and discussions around investments. And we're now turning our attention to the focus of what is really our most critical investment, and that's our workforce, because that is absolutely how we guarantee our success going forward in the future. So very critical topic for us. One of the things that we've done across Nucor is we're focused on the educating high school students, college students about the benefits of the steel industry, the technology of the steel industry, that they're rewarding, challenging, and high-paying jobs. I'll give you an example of how we're working to grow talent. Many of you in the room know Randy Skagen. Randy's been part of the AIST, considerable contributions to the program over many years, and in fact was recognized yesterday. Well, Randy also has about 28 years with Nucor, and during that time he's also done a few good things for Nucor. About 6 years ago, Randy helped, with his leadership and support, we entered into a program, a partnership with Shelton State down in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And that partnership has enabled us, we've got about 40 to 50 students in it currently. They're going through an associate's program. They're recruited from those local areas as well as sister divisions. They go there to school. They take classes in electronics, electrical engineering. They get their associate's degree. At the same time, they also work at the steel plant there in Tuscaloosa. And during longer periods of time away from class, they go back to their sister or their home divisions where they have an opportunity to work. So we're growing talent from within. We're growing talent from outside. We're working to educate. And we're also taking much appreciation of how important it is on the diversification front. And from there, it strengthens our culture. It helps bring new perspectives into the industry and helps us as a company grow. Some of the initiatives we've had is partnering with minority universities like Tuskegee in Alabama, partnering with minority women in steel industry, Hispanics in steel engineering, to bring those talents in and help them understand the career potential and opportunities that exist within steel.
Thank you very much, Johnny. Thank you all on this. Carol, you have to deal with this male-dominated industry. And of course, you had a company of your own.
Yes,
so really, there's sort of a two-level question here. What do you think the steel industry, how can they do better? And how about at Harbison-Walker? What are you doing?
Well, I can certainly speak to what Harbison is doing. And Johnny, you made a very good point relative to the characterization of people and their value to a company. At Harbison, we view our people as our most important asset. And not unlike other asset planning, we're very planful about our people processes. So we have a people strategy. We recognize we're in a war for talent, and that war is fought on multiple fronts across industries. It transcends industry boundaries. We're competing with Starbucks for talent. All of us are. Let's be realistic about it. We're competing with service businesses and as well as industrial businesses. So for us at Harbison, number one was making our value proposition to our employees a compelling one. And we start with the notion of retaining talent first and foremost, because not unlike my colleagues here, we have multiple generations of employees under our roof, and no one is the same. Everybody has different needs, and quite frankly, individuals over their lives have different needs and wants, and so one size does not fit all with respect to benefits programs, compensation programs, for example. So a case in point would be a grassroots project that we initiated a couple of years ago now called Project Gravy. Hey, I didn't name it, but it's the concept is it's the gravy on top of everything else. You know, the good stuff. You know, the base premise is we pay our people fairly, commensurate with their time and talents, and on top of that, we want to do good things, and we have this pool of money with which to do it. So for us, it was an opportunity to do a voice of our own people and engage our employees on what they wanted and needed. And as a result, we had a list of opportunities for us to engage, and some of them were very simple, like give us stuff to wear. We're proud of our company, we're proud of our name, we want to wear HarbisonWalker stuff. Well, that's an easy one. Budget approved. Then you get to the tougher stuff, like flex time programs, like paternity leave. Not necessarily maternity leave, but we have young fathers who want to spend time with their new families as well. So as a result, we're constantly refreshing our programs to retain our talent. Similarly, we want to be attractive to new recruits, and so we're doing all the things that have been mentioned here in terms of investment in STEM programs and in-school programs. We're also looking at, because we need basic trades, we need mechanics, we need welders, we need folks to work in tough conditions in our customers' sites, our own sites. And so we're being more planful at how we actually build the talent, work with schools. We're teaching teachers how to talk about ceramics technologies to inspire the next generation of our employee.
And if I could just interrupt, and then I'm going to move to these final, because we have a few minutes for questions. If I remember correctly, 1/2 of your leadership team are women.
Yes, I was getting to that.
All right.
And oh, by the way, we're diverse. So, to me, and for us at Harbison, diversity is not just gender. It's a variety of things. It's diversity of thought, of experiences, and so we're looking to get the best and the brightest. And my advice to any young professional, male, female, doesn't matter, is do your best, find your passion, and be really good at what you do, because competence and capability is what puts you in a seat on a stage, not gender.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for your comments.
Wow, you got the last word.
Thank you.
I see the men applauding.
Oh, well, thanks.
George, I think we have a few minutes for some questions from the audience, sir.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to give a shout out, thank you to the audience. The questions are coming in fast and furious, so the fact that your interest is strong is very much appreciated. So let's try to go through as many as we can, as quickly as we can. Number one, with so much new capacity coming on board, what happens when there is a next turndown in the economy or Section 232 sanctions are removed? Is the steel industry ready for this?
30-second responses, real quick, from anybody. This is a great question. It was actually one of the many I had that I couldn't get to. What happens? I mean, we're really building all this extra capacity. I think as much as 18 million tons in the U.S. by 2022. When there's a downturn, is this going to make it even worse for steel companies here? Anybody want to respond?
I think, again, the demand is going to also increase. So we are seeing a growing demand in North America, but we design to have better highs when a good market's happening, better highs when there's a low market. So if you're cost efficient, you have the lowest cost possible, you make the right products, you win the day.
So you're not worried about this?
Our teams tighten the belt better than anybody when they have to.
Johnny, 30 seconds.
Market forces will kick in, and you have to position yourself to compete throughout the cycle, and that's exactly what Nucor does.
So you're not worried either. George, next question.
Okay, follow-up. Although industry has already undergone significant consolidation and rationalization, do you expect further consolidation to occur, which could improve utilization rates above the cost of capital?
Further consolidation, anybody want to take that?
I think
Scott?
absolutely. I think you're going to see consolidation with any cycle, whether it's a high cycle or a low cycle. The consolidation is good for this industry. It's good for any industry, and it'll make us stronger coming out of it. So, yeah.
Great.
If 232 tariffs is viewed as a stopgap, what would the quota system look like?
Good question too.
Well, I think quota would make a country decide what are the best products to put in the space. And I think that brings more reliability, so you know what imports are there, not floods of one thing or another that end up disrupting the whole marketplace.
Yeah, and you have to look at that new capacity that's coming online 5 years, 7 years down the road, and it's in different industries. It's in flat roll. It's in heavy products. It's in a lot of different OTCG. So you have to look across the board there.
Go ahead, George.
Is there any support for a Section 232 on imported autos and auto parts?
Yeah, as you know, there's this recommendation out there. We don't quite know what it's all about with respect to the auto industry and 232s. Commerce Department has made that recommendation, I believe, in mid-February. The President has until next week, I think, to decide on this. Do any of you have any particular views on whether there should be a 232 with respect to automobiles and auto parts?
I think it's a much more complicated supply chain, so it's not necessarily as, maybe even a little bit more cumbersome.
You all supply the auto industry. You're going to keep your mouth shut.
I
get it.
I noticed the quietness.
I get it. George, next one.
Okay. How will the shutdown of iron ore capacity in Brazil impact American steel market?
Yeah. Anybody? Is it impacting the U.S. steel market?
I mean,
Yeah, I think it is. I think you're seeing those iron ore those costs are remaining higher than what they normally would be in the market that we're in right now. If we had that, fortunately, one of the things that we are just announced a new EAF, so we're going to have EAF and blast furnace technology in the company, and we're self-sufficient in iron ore. So
right.
that's a benefit. We think that's an advantage for us.
Good. Conrad, did you have a thought?
yeah, I mean, I think clearly it's raised iron ore prices throughout the world, and what I'm always looking at is kind of the cost of our EAF-based steel versus blast furnace and iron ore-based steel, and how do you get to the optimum? And clearly, I think for North America, obviously iron ore prices getting elevated a little bit helps, and then for us in Portland, where we buy a slab from, among other places, from Brazil, it's less good. So,
good.
Two-edged sword.
Ron, do we have time for any others?
Sure, we have a few more, and there's some really technical questions, and I wouldn't expect anything less from our audience. I'm going to try to break it down, and we'll kind of move quickly with it. So this is about automobiles now. In 2018, a little more than 17 million auto units were built in the U.S. How many are going to be built 10 years from now? Given all the EV, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, what's our expectation for one of our biggest customers?
Well, I would say cars aren't going to go away in our lifetime. I don't think that's reasonable to even think that. But cars are going to change. They always have. I think if you look at the steel output today, outside of tons, if you looked at a different metric and you said, what is the linear feet the steel industry is making today? That number would be startling different, because we're all making lighter products that are stronger, right. And that's helped with the fuel emissions, with the cost of vehicles. So even if there's an electric power plant, or hopefully technology isn't pre-decided, there's still some really exciting things with fuel cells going on in Europe. There's going to be a steel cage around it. Now, what that cage looks like in the future, I think, is going to be up to all those great minds out there and our great minds up here to decide how do we do that in the most cost-effective, sustainable way.
Good. Any other thoughts on anyone?
I'd like to be able to predict that. I don't think we can predict it. I think I agree. It's going to be different. If you just look over the last 2 years, we've gone from just around numbers, a 60-40 split cars to SUV or crossovers, trucks, to a 60-40, 60 plus, probably 30 plus split. Now, the pendulum has swung all the way to crossovers and SUVs and trucks. So that's gonna continue to change, especially with depending who's in the White House at the time and what happens with electrical cars and those types of things. If I could predict that, I'd have your job.
All right. So, due to increased production that we've seen and some geopolitical issues around the world relative to raw materials, so we're speaking now of electrodes, refractory, DR grade pellets. What is your strategy to mitigate the effects of a tightened supply of your raw materials?
Relationships are always king. You have to respect the people that help you be successful. And I know when we look at the 232, we had to get steel to our customers. And when things got tight, like electrodes and refractories, our suppliers stepped up. And it's about being there all the time and understanding this. It's not about factional. It's not about winning individual battles. It's about that relationship long term.
Johnny.
In addition to that, I think it's how we become more efficient with those raw materials.
Efficiencies, Conrad?
Well, I do think that especially in the U.S., where we're seeing such a high percentage of EAF-based production and further growth of it, that I think we need to be looking very strongly at the development of DRI, and from an EVRAZ perspective, we're constantly looking at DRI, scrap, international FE units, and how to optimize that. So once again, we've got that lowest cost, most sustainable position through the long cycle.
Ron, do we have time for another
We
question?
got one last question because it's great. They just answered the next two questions we had. So good job, panelists. All right, we're going to wrap it up on this question. So when it comes to attracting people to our industry, young people, smart people, rich people to invest, what can we do to change the perception of a blue-collar, low-tech industry?
The old perception question. We all recognize that the steel industry has a perception problem, an image problem. What can we do about it? Anybody?
I would suggest we just deliver on what these folks, and I know I'm talking about in our own companies. There's a lot of great plans in place to revolutionize the industry, data technology, advancements, and adopting next generation technologies to ensure that this industry has a compelling proposition for the future. It's all, the groundwork is laid. It's just the time to deliver.
Good.
We need to share our great message. We have a responsibility to engage students at the high school level to help them understand the technology that's in play, the advancements that are, and the opportunities that exist in steel. We have a commitment to them in which we need to educate, engage, and allow them to see what's going on in the steel industry.
Start with the young people. Scott,
Yeah,
thoughts? How do we change the perception?
It's our messaging, and we need to do a better job with that. I challenge I was thinking about it this morning, and I don't have to challenge anybody in this room, but good challenge. Steel is going to be around. Steel is a part of our daily life. I woke up this morning, thinking of a question. I'm like, okay, how long is it going to be until? Well, I got my shirt off the hanger. I turned on the faucet. Everything you do is steel, and we need to message that better.
Right.
And the technology is more exciting than ever.
Great. Barry.
I totally agree. We have to not only have a great message, but we have to deliver. We have to make our mills safer than anywhere else. We have to make our employees cherish their jobs, and they are the asset. They are the best part of what we do, and they are the community. So again, the more we can impact our community by doing what we say, send moms and dads home safe every day, and have a place where, we have a great scholarship program for our employees' kids to go to college. It's giving back. It's turning every corner and saying, hey, SDI was there, and they're standing up.
Great. Conrad, you get the last word. The image problem of the steel industry. How would you solve that problem?
I think it's a local thing to work with. It doesn't happen globally. It happens locally in each of our communities. It's what Johnny talked about relative to working with the local community colleges, participating in local high schools. The power of when we've hired or have spent time with young people in our areas where we're really impacting the economy, I think that's where the biggest impact happens.
Panelists, it's been a pleasure to be with you today. How about a big round of applause for these real industry leaders?
Thank you,
George,
John.
back to
Before we close, I want to remind everybody that lunch is provided for all town hall registrants immediately after in the exhibit hall, and we look forward to everyone meeting there to continue the morning's discussion. I would also like to thank again NTN Bearing Corporation of America for their sponsorship of the town hall event. I would also like to thank Centro Metal Cut and Mid-Owl for the coffee service this morning, as well as EMCO and Gulf States Engineering for the water service. And for sponsoring the upcoming exhibit hall luncheon, we must also thank Agreco, Andritz Metals, Bogner, CBMM North America, I2, R2, and the Timken Company. So as we close, I would like to thank John for your efforts, for our wonderful panelists, for their spirit, debate, and discussion, and of course all of you in the audience for being part of it. So one last round of applause for everybody. It's good stuff. Thank you, and this concludes our program for today. Have a good rest of the afternoon.